Beneath the wide, gray skies of the Pontic Caspian steppe, the grass seemed to ripple like an endless sea. The wind moved slowly here, carrying with it the faint smell of wild sage and distant rain. To the untrained eye, this landscape might appear empty, silent, forgotten. Yet to those who knew how to look, the land was alive with memory. Scattered burial mounds dotted the horizon like ancient watchmen, keeping their eternal vigil over the secrets of peoples long past. This is where our story begins, in the heart of the steppe, in a world defined by motion, by horses, by the endless dance between the living earth and those who rode across it. Tonight, we travel back nearly 2,000 years, to a time when the Sarmatian confederations ruled these lands. And among them, we find the rise of one particular people, the Alans, whose name would echo across continents and centuries. If you stay with this story until the end, you will follow the Alans on their remarkable journey. From scattered steppe clans to a powerful warrior nation, from the Caucasus to the heart of the Roman Empire, from allies to enemies, from obscurity to legend. Together we will trace their wars, their migrations, their art, their language, and their beliefs, all the way to their lasting legacy in modern cultures of Europe and the Caucasus. So settle in, let your mind rest, and stay with me until the very end of this quiet journey through history. The first century after the birth of Christ was a time of change across Eurasia. Rome stood at the height of its imperial power, but on the fringes of its dominion the steppe world was stirring. The Sarmatians, a loose confederation of Iranian-speaking nomads, commanded the open plains from the Don to the Carpathians. They were not a single people but many, bound together by language, by custom, and by the necessity of survival in a world where power shifted as quickly as the seasons. It was within this confederation that the Alans began to take shape. They did not appear suddenly, as if from nowhere. Rather, they emerged slowly, as rivers gather strength from countless tributaries. Archaeological evidence suggests that in the decades around 35 AD, we begin to see signs of a distinct Alan identity forming. Roman authors, Pliny the Elder first and later Tacitus, record raids by a new group of Sarmatian horsemen pressing south across the Caucasus into Armenia and into Rome's client states. These were the first footprints of the Alans upon the stage of history. The steppe had seen such transformations before. Power on these plains was fluid. Clans rose and fell, absorbed into larger tribal unions or shattered by defeat. The emergence of the Alans was not just a political change but a cultural one. Burial complexes from this period reveal a society undergoing rapid stratification. The kurgans, the great earthen mounds, grew taller, more elaborate. Within them, archaeologists have found chambers lined with timber, containing not just the bones of warriors but also intricate treasures. Golden diadems engraved with animal motifs, silver drinking vessels bearing Greek inscriptions, swords inlaid with precious metal. These were not the possessions of a scattered people, but of an elite class asserting its power and its identity. The horses buried alongside these warriors tell another part of the story. Their bridles and harness fittings were not simple. They were masterpieces of bronze and iron work, designed to give their riders maximum control in the chaos of mounted battle. The cheek pieces were often cast in the form of griffins, stags, and other sacred creatures, symbols that were at once functional and ceremonial. The very bits used to control the horses were forged from twisted iron, allowing fine control over the animal's movements. These details suggest a cavalry culture of astonishing sophistication, one capable of executing the fluid maneuvers that made steppe warfare so fearsome to their enemies. Weaponry, too, reveals the character of this rising people. The Alans favored long swords, some more than a meter in length, perfectly suited for slashing from horseback. Their composite bows, made from layers of horn, wood, and sinew, could send arrows fast and far enough to pierce armor. And the arrowheads recovered from Alan burials show a remarkable standardization, as if produced in centralized workshops capable of equipping entire warbands with matching weapons. This is the image of a society organizing itself for both war and prestige, ready to take its place among the dominant powers of the steppe. Language binds these discoveries to a broader story. The speech of the Alans belonged to the Eastern Iranian branch of the Indo-European family, sharing roots with that of the earlier Scythians but with distinctive features that mark a separate evolution. This linguistic continuity reminds us that the Alans were not foreign intruders, but heirs of a long tradition of Iranian-speaking nomads who had ruled these lands for centuries. To imagine the Alans at this moment in time is to picture a people on the threshold. Their warbands rode out under open skies, striking fear into neighboring kingdoms. Their artisans worked gold and silver into shapes that reflected both steppe mythology and the influence of distant Hellenistic cultures. Their leaders were being laid to rest beneath monumental mounds, their horses sacrificed to accompany them into the afterlife. A new identity was crystallizing, one that would carry the Alans far beyond the horizon of the Pontic steppe. As the first century drew on, the Alans would press ever southward, challenging Rome's client states and clashing with the kingdom of Iberia and Armenia. These raids were not merely acts of plunder but part of a larger process, testing their strength, expanding their territory, forging alliances and rivalries that would shape their destiny. Each skirmish, each campaign, drew them further into the geopolitical web of the ancient world, where Rome, Parthia, and the steppe powers all contended for influence. This was only the beginning. The Alans, still a rising force, had not yet reached the height of their power. Ahead lay centuries of migration, conquest, and survival, centuries in which they would shape and be shaped by the great events of late antiquity. But to understand that journey, we must first understand how they lived, what they believed, and how they fought on these endless grasslands under the ever-watchful sky. So let us linger a moment longer here, among the Kurgans and the rolling plains, before we follow them southward into history. For in this quiet place, we have seen the first signs of a people who would leave their mark upon Europe, upon the Caucasus, and even upon the distant kingdoms of Asia. Their story has just begun. As the Alans began to assert themselves across the Pontic steppe, their society was taking shape with remarkable clarity. Life for these nomadic horsemen was intimately tied to the rhythm of the land, to the seasonal patterns of grass and water, to the movements of the herds upon which they relied. Unlike sedentary peoples who measured time by the turning of crops, The Alans measured time by the gallop of their horses and the migration of herds. Each generation learned to read the steppe as a living map, to anticipate its dangers and its opportunities. Archaeological evidence paints a vivid picture of this daily existence. Excavations of settlements and temporary encampments suggest that Alan dwellings were mobile and practical, often constructed from wood, felt, and hides. The conical tents, later called yurts by neighboring peoples, could be erected or dismantled in a matter of hours, allowing entire families to move with their livestock as the seasons shifted. Within these homes, there was a rhythm of domestic life that balanced labor and leisure, survival and ceremony. Women tended to weaving, spinning wool into garments both warm and decorative. Men honed weapons, repaired harnesses, and maintained their herds. Children learned on horseback from the moment they could walk, practicing balance and control until the saddle felt like a second skin. Yet mobility did not imply isolation. The Alans were deeply connected to a network of trade and cultural exchange that stretched across the Eurasian steppe and beyond. Artifacts recovered from burial mounds show Greek, Roman, and even Eastern influences. Silver cups with inscriptions, intricate jewelry, and horse trappings with foreign motifs all indicate that the Alans were participants in a larger world of commerce and diplomacy. This interaction was not limited to objects. Envoys, raiders, and traders carried languages, ideas, and stories across vast distances, enriching Alan culture with a mosaic of influences while simultaneously reinforcing their own identity. It was also during this time that social stratification became increasingly visible. The earlier egalitarian structures of nomadic clans were giving way to more complex hierarchies. Burial mounds make this clear. Some contained only a few simple grave goods, while others held the wealth of an entire family, with multiple chambers dedicated to elite warriors, their horses, and attendants. Such mounds were statements of power as much as they were memorials. They declared the status of those interred, and they broadcast to the steppe the emergence of a leadership capable of uniting disparate clans under a shared banner. The turn of the 2nd century brought both opportunity and challenge to the Alans. By now, their reputation as formidable horsemen had spread across the steppe and into the borders of neighboring kingdoms. Word of their raids, their wealth, and their speed traveled faster than any rider. Yet with rising fame came rising responsibility. A people so mobile, so reliant on the vast plains for sustenance, had to balance ambition with prudence, for a miscalculation could leave a clan exposed to famine, conflict, or absorption by stronger neighbors. The grasslands themselves dictated the rhythm of life. Each season carried its own demands. In spring, herds were guided to fresh pastures, foals were born, and warriors polished their armor in preparation for campaigns. Summer brought long days of grazing and travel, scouting routes, and establishing temporary encampments. Autumn was a time of harvest for both humans and animals, ensuring stores of food and fodder for the coming cold. Winter demanded resilience, resourcefulness, and communal cooperation, as harsh winds and deep snow could isolate entire clans. In such an environment, the survival of the Alans was intertwined with the natural world, their fortunes rising and falling with the cycles of the steppe. It was also a period of cultural consolidation. The burial mounds of this era grew larger, more intricate, and more telling of social hierarchy. Some mounds contained multiple layers of chambers, each housing a family line of warriors. Golden ornaments, elaborate horse harnesses, and weapons with delicate inlays were placed alongside the bodies, suggesting a society deeply invested in ritualized remembrance. The craftsmanship of these items reflected influences drawn from both the Hellenistic world and more distant Eastern traditions. This synthesis of styles mirrored the Alans' position at the crossroads of cultures, a people who maintained a distinct identity while engaging actively with the wider world. Their society was defined not only by hierarchy but by a clear set of values and expectations. Martial skill, courage, loyalty to one's clan, and wisdom in council were qualities highly prized. Leadership was fluid yet merit-based, often resting on the dual pillars of familial heritage and personal achievement. A chief might inherit a position, but he would be expected to prove himself through acts of strategy, negotiation, or battlefield excellence. Failure in either could result in displacement, a reminder that authority on the steppe was both fragile and respected. The Alans' growing interactions with Rome were particularly significant. By the early 2nd century, some Roman governors and client kings sought alliances with them. The Alans offered their services as mercenaries, often providing cavalry units skilled in both raiding and conventional battle tactics. For Rome, the Alans represented a tool and a threat. Their speed and mobility could protect borders or destabilize them. In response, Roman authors like Cassius Dio and later Ammianus Marcellinus noted the Alans' increasing strategic importance, sometimes admiring their discipline and organization, other times emphasizing the danger posed by their unpredictable raids. Beyond warfare, trade shaped Alan culture in profound ways. Exchanges along the steppe routes brought textiles, coins, ceramics, and metalwork from regions as far afield as the Eastern Mediterranean, Persia, and Central Asia. These goods were not mere luxury items. They symbolized connectivity, intelligence, and status. Elite burials frequently included imported artifacts, demonstrating both wealth and cosmopolitan taste. Yet while the Alans embraced foreign objects, they never lost their distinct cultural markers. Clothing styles, tattooing practices, and oral traditions maintained a sense of continuity with earlier Iranian-speaking nomads. Equally important were the spiritual beliefs of the Alans. Shamanistic practices endured alongside newly adopted deities from the cultures they contacted. Horses, in particular, held deep symbolic significance. Burial mounds with sacrificed horses suggest a belief in companion animals accompanying warriors into the afterlife, a reflection of the steppe's intrinsic link between life, death, and mobility. Celestial events, eclipses, comets, and the changing of seasons were observed and interpreted as omens, guiding both daily decisions and larger strategic actions. Rituals often included offerings of food, weapons, and crafted objects, reinforcing the social bonds of clans and reinforcing the authority of leaders. The military organization of the Alans also evolved during this period. While individual skill remained paramount, The rise of coordinated units reflected a more structured approach to conflict. Cavalry squads could execute flanking maneuvers, feigned retreats, and synchronized attacks that overwhelmed slower, heavier infantry forces. Their composite bows allowed rapid, precise fire even at high speeds, while long swords and lances delivered devastating strikes in close quarters. Such versatility made the Alans ideal allies and feared adversaries. Their ability to combine strategy with the natural mobility of the steppe environment set them apart from other nomadic groups. Political relationships within the steppe shifted as well. The Alans maintained a delicate balance of diplomacy and intimidation. They formed alliances with certain Sarmatian clans while competing with others for grazing rights, trade influence, and strategic footholds. Marriages between elite families strengthened these networks, creating bonds that could prevent outright conflict while simultaneously reinforcing social hierarchies. These relationships, both familial and political, were vital to the stability and expansion of Alan power. During this era, archaeological discoveries reveal evidence of temporary settlements near rivers and key crossroads, indicating the importance of strategic positioning. Such sites offered access to water, pasture, and trade routes, enabling the Alans to sustain both their herds and their growing populations. The construction of defensive ditches, palisades, and watchpoints suggests that even a mobile people understood the need for temporary fortifications in times of threat. By the middle of the 2nd century, the Alans were no longer confined to the Pontic steppe. Raids and migrations began to extend further west and south, touching the edges of the Caucasus, the Danube frontier, and even the Black Sea littoral. These movements were not purely aggressive. They were often responses to ecological pressures, intertribal conflicts, and the lure of trade opportunities. The adaptability of the Alans, their ability to integrate new lands, interact with diverse cultures, and maintain cohesion despite the challenges of mobility, was becoming a hallmark of their identity. In these decades, the Alans established a reputation as both skilled negotiators and formidable warriors. Their growing wealth, strategic awareness, and cultural sophistication set the stage for the events that would follow in the centuries ahead. Encounters with Gothic tribes, Hunnic migrations, and eventual settlements within the Roman Empire itself. Yet, even as they prepared to step beyond the Pontic steppe, their connection to it remained profound. The endless grasslands, the rolling rivers, and the watchful burial mounds all bore witness to a people who had mastered their environment and were poised to leave a mark on the wider world. The story of the Alans in this period is one of balance between mobility and permanence, war and diplomacy, tradition and adaptation. It is the story of a people learning to navigate a world of shifting powers while remaining rooted in the rhythms of the steppe. And as we follow them further, we will see how these foundations, laid in the quiet yet powerful landscape of their homeland, would enable them to influence distant kingdoms, survive migrations, and endure in memory long after the grasslands of their ancestors had witnessed their first triumphs. As the 2nd century advanced, the Alans' influence began to ripple outward, extending beyond the open plains into regions shaped by mountains, rivers, and older civilizations. The Caucasus, a rugged frontier separating the steppe from fertile lowlands, became a stage where the Alans tested both their skill and their adaptability. Here, Geography demanded new strategies. Narrow passes required careful coordination, river valleys offered opportunities for trade, and dense forests challenged their traditional mobility. Yet the Alans proved capable of adjusting, bringing their signature speed and precision to landscapes far different from the sweeping grasslands they called home. The records of Roman historians and local chronicles reveal that the Alans' interactions with the kingdoms of Armenia, Iberia, and Albania, in the Caucasus, not the Balkans, were as much about diplomacy as they were about raids. While tales of sudden horse-mounted incursions often dominate modern imagination, the reality was more nuanced. The Alans formed alliances with local rulers, provided mercenary forces, and negotiated for grazing rights and trade privileges. These arrangements often required skillful diplomacy. A misstep could turn an ally into an enemy, and in the fragmented political landscape of the Caucasus, stability was never guaranteed. Archaeological findings during this period continue to illuminate the richness of Alan culture. Excavations of burial mounds along the northern slopes of the Caucasus have revealed elite burials filled with finely crafted artifacts. Golden diadems, silver drinking vessels, and jewelry decorated with intricate animal motifs testify to the aesthetic sophistication of Alan artisans. Weaponry in these tombs demonstrates advanced metallurgy. Swords with pattern-welded steel, long lances balanced for mounted combat, and composite bows capable of delivering devastating accuracy over great distances. Each item offers evidence not only of wealth but of a society increasingly structured around martial skill, prestige, and strategic sophistication. Horses remained central to Alan life, both as instruments of war and as symbols of social status. The elaborate harnesses and bridles discovered in tombs were more than practical tools. They were expressions of identity. Some cheek pieces were cast in the shapes of griffins or mythical beasts, combining ceremonial significance with battlefield utility. The twisted iron bits provided fine control over the horse, allowing riders to execute complex maneuvers in the chaos of combat. Even the selection of horses, their breeding, training, and care, reflected a sophisticated understanding of equine management that supported both mobility and military dominance. The social organization of the Alans also evolved. Leadership increasingly blended hereditary prestige with meritocratic recognition. Chieftains were expected not only to command in battle, but to mediate disputes, manage alliances, and maintain the cohesion of multiple clans. Councils of elders, warriors, and occasionally respected women played essential roles in decision-making, reflecting a balance of influence that preserved unity while allowing flexibility. These structures allowed the Alans to respond quickly to opportunities and threats, an adaptability that would serve them well in migrations and conflicts far from their homeland. The spiritual life of the Alans intertwined with both daily practice and monumental ritual. Burials often included offerings to deities associated with fertility, protection, and victory, as well as symbolic objects meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. Horses and sometimes even attendants were sacrificed, reflecting a belief in continuity beyond death. Mythical motifs on grave goods, griffins, stags, serpents, provided both protection and guidance for the deceased, while reinforcing the cultural identity of the living community. Oral traditions, recited in the Alan language, kept these cosmologies alive, binding generations together in shared narrative and ritual. The Alans' military engagements in the Caucasus had far-reaching consequences. As they conducted raids or offered mercenary services, they gained not only wealth but also knowledge of distant terrains, peoples, and political systems. These experiences enhanced their strategic versatility, allowing them to operate effectively in environments as varied as the lowlands of Armenia, the river valleys of Iberia, and the northern Black Sea coast. This period also saw the standardization of weapons and armor, suggesting organized production systems capable of equipping large warbands uniformly, a testament to both logistical skill and social cohesion. Trade and cultural exchange flourished alongside warfare. The Alans' proximity to Hellenistic settlements and Roman client states brought exposure to new materials, techniques, and ideas. Imported goods, Greek ceramics, Roman coins, and Persian textiles entered their communities, sometimes appearing in burial contexts alongside locally crafted items. These artifacts illustrate an openness to external influence without the loss of cultural identity. The Alans absorbed innovation selectively, blending it with established traditions to create a hybrid culture that was distinct yet cosmopolitan. By the middle of the 2nd century, the Alans were also becoming known across the broader Eurasian steppe. Stories of their skill in mounted warfare and their disciplined raids traveled along trade routes and through diplomatic channels. Even distant Sarmatian tribes recognized the rise of a people who combined speed, endurance, and tactical intelligence in ways few could match. Yet the Alans' success was never assured. Harsh winters, overgrazed pastures, and competition with rival clans required constant vigilance. Mobility, discipline, and adaptability remained essential for survival. Interactions with Rome continued to shape Alan's strategy. Roman authorities sometimes sought the Alans' support as auxiliary cavalry units, integrating them into campaigns while respecting their independence. These arrangements offered the Alans access to wealth, prestige, and political influence, but they also carried risks. A mismanaged alliance or a poorly timed raid could provoke retribution from a far more powerful neighbor. Through careful negotiation, the Alans learned to navigate these dangers, using their martial reputation as leverage while maintaining the autonomy that had allowed them to flourish on the steppe. By the end of this century, the Alans had moved beyond the purely local sphere of influence. They were a people increasingly aware of their capacity to shape events far from their homeland. Their culture had solidified, their military skill had evolved, and their social structures supported both cohesion and adaptability. The Khorgans continued to rise across the landscape, visible markers of continuity, memory, and status. And beneath the gray skies of the Pontic Caspian steppe, the Alans rode onward, aware that the world beyond their horizons offered both opportunity and challenge. The story of the Alans in this period is a story of maturation. They had moved from scattered steppe clans to a structured, sophisticated, and formidable society. Their adaptability, intelligence, and courage set them apart not only from other Sarmatian groups, but from nearly all of their neighbors. And yet, for all their skill and cunning, they remained bound to the rhythms of the steppe, to the cycles of grass, river, and sky that had shaped them for generations. Their journey was far from complete, but the foundations laid during this period would carry them across continents, into the heart of empires, and into the pages of history for centuries to come. The early 3rd century marked a turning point in the trajectory of the Alans. By now, they were no longer merely steppe raiders or regional power brokers. They were becoming a people whose movements and alliances could influence the course of empires. Their raids into Armenia and Iberia had expanded in scope and ambition, while their growing involvement in Roman affairs, both as allies and occasional adversaries, demonstrated a strategic sophistication that extended far beyond the Pontic steppe. Life among the Alans remained deeply entwined with the rhythms of the natural world. Spring still brought the birthing of foals and the renewal of herds. Summer required vigilance over grazing lands and trade routes. Autumn was for harvesting and preparing for winter, and winter demanded resilience against the cold and isolation. Their survival depended not only on the strength of their horses and weapons, but on the collective wisdom passed down through generations. Knowledge of water sources, pasture cycles, and hidden pathways through the steppe was as crucial as mastery of the sword or bow. Yet while daily life retained continuity, their social structures were evolving. The hierarchy within Alan society became more pronounced, reflecting the growing importance of wealth, military prowess, and leadership ability. Burial mounds from this era display a remarkable stratification. Simple graves for common warriors, elaborate multi-chambered kurgans for elite leaders. These tombs were not just resting places. They were instruments of memory and power. By commemorating the dead with finely crafted goods, patterned swords, gold and silver ornaments, and decorated horse harnesses, the living reinforced their own status and legitimacy, while inspiring loyalty among clan members. Military organization, too, had reached new heights of sophistication. The Alans had perfected the art of mounted warfare, combining rapid movement with disciplined formations. Their cavalry units were capable of feigned retreats, ambushes, and complex encirclement tactics that few adversaries could counter. Weapons technology continued to advance. Swords forged with pattern welding, lances balanced for precision, and composite bows capable of penetrating armor at considerable distances. Even the design of arrows became standardized, allowing mass deployment without sacrificing accuracy. The Alans' mastery of mounted combat transformed them into a mobile force that could strike quickly, disappear, and regroup before enemies could respond. Trade and cultural exchange further reinforced their position. The Alans had become conduits for goods, ideas, and technologies between the Mediterranean, Persia, and the Eurasian steppe. Greek ceramics, Roman coins, and Eastern textiles all appeared in their settlements and burials, evidence of a people adept at integrating foreign influences while preserving their cultural identity. This interaction was not passive. The Alans selectively absorbed techniques, aesthetics, and materials that enhanced their society's sophistication and power. The result was a culture both rooted in steppe traditions and enriched by the wider ancient world. Religion and ritual remained central to social cohesion. Horses, in particular, retained profound symbolic significance, representing not only mobility and wealth but spiritual connection. Sacrifices of animals and occasionally attendants accompanied the elite in burial, underscoring beliefs in the afterlife and the continuation of status beyond death. Grave goods featuring griffins, stags, and serpents were not merely decorative. They encoded cosmological knowledge and moral values, linking the living to their ancestors and the spiritual world. The Alans' oral traditions, transmitted through song and story, ensured that these beliefs remained vibrant and communal, providing guidance in both daily life and strategic decisions. Political relationships grew increasingly complex. The Alans negotiated alliances with some Sarmatian clans while maintaining rivalries with others. Marriages between elite families helped cement bonds, creating networks that extended across the steppe and into adjacent territories. These social and political structures allowed them to coordinate large-scale military operations, manage trade and resources, and maintain cohesion despite their inherently mobile lifestyle. Authority was respected but contingent upon proven ability, a balance that encouraged both individual initiative and collective responsibility. Interactions with Rome also deepened. By the 3rd century, the Alans had become a recognized force in Roman eyes, both admired and feared. Their cavalry units were valued as mercenaries, providing Rome with mobile, highly skilled troops capable of operating in terrain unsuitable for conventional infantry. Yet these relationships were delicate. Alliances could shift suddenly, and a miscalculated raid could provoke Roman retaliation. The Alans learned to navigate these dynamics carefully, leveraging their martial reputation to secure favorable arrangements while preserving autonomy. As the Alans moved further south and west, they encountered new environments that tested their adaptability. The foothills of the Caucasus, the river valleys of the Black Sea, and even the fringes of the Danube all presented challenges distinct from the open steppe. Terrain, climate, and the presence of fortified settlements required adjustments in strategy, equipment, and leadership. The Alans' ability to adapt to these new conditions without losing the cohesion of their society was a hallmark of their enduring success. Art and craftsmanship flourished alongside these developments. Burials continued to reveal finely worked objects, intricate jewelry, engraved silver vessels, and weapons with decorative inlays. Horse trappings were especially elaborate, often adorned with mythological motifs that combined symbolic meaning with functional design. These artifacts reflect a society that valued aesthetics as much as utility, blending the practical needs of nomadic life with the spiritual and social imperatives of a growing, interconnected culture. By the middle of the 3rd century, the Alans were increasingly mobile not only across the steppe but into the political heartlands of surrounding regions. Their reputation for discipline, mobility, and martial skill preceded them, influencing both Roman and local perceptions. They were no longer peripheral nomads but actors capable of shaping regional events. Their growing involvement in trade, diplomacy, and military affairs set the stage for migrations and expansions that would carry their influence across Europe and into the empire itself. The story of the Alans in this period is one of maturation and expansion. They had evolved from scattered Sarmatian clans into a cohesive, sophisticated society, capable of influencing distant territories while remaining firmly connected to their steppe origins. Their adaptability, skill, and cultural richness laid the groundwork for centuries of migration, conquest, and integration with other peoples. And yet, for all their achievements, they remained bound to the vast open landscapes that had shaped them, the rolling grasslands, the winding rivers, and the watchful burial mounds that recorded their ancestors' lives and deeds. The Alans' journey in this era is a story of balance between mobility and permanence, tradition and innovation, diplomacy and force. As they prepared to venture into the turbulent centuries ahead, these foundations would prove crucial, allowing them to survive migrations, confrontations with other steppe peoples, and eventual encounters with the great empires of their age. The echoes of this period of strategy, culture, and adaptability would resonate far beyond the steppe, leaving a lasting imprint on the history of Eurasia that as the 3rd century progressed, the Alans' presence became increasingly felt across the broader regions bordering the Pontic steppe. Their reputation as swift, disciplined horsemen preceded them, opening doors to both opportunity and confrontation. The movement of entire clans southward and westward was no longer a sporadic pattern of raids. It had become a deliberate strategy to secure pastures, wealth, and influence over neighboring kingdoms. Each migration was a calculated response to environmental pressures, political shifts, and the desire to expand their cultural and economic reach. The landscapes the Alans traversed demanded adaptability. The highlands of the Caucasus, the river valleys of Armenia, and the northern Black Sea littoral presented new challenges. Rugged terrain, fortified settlements, and rival tribes. Yet the Alans' mastery of mounted warfare and their social cohesion allowed them to navigate these regions with remarkable efficiency. Scout parties surveyed routes, while leaders coordinated warbands to execute strategies that balanced speed, surprise, and sustainability. The horse, central to Alan life, remained the key instrument of mobility and power. Its breeding, care, and training were treated with the utmost seriousness, ensuring that both war horses and pack animals could endure long campaigns and harsh climates. Archaeological evidence from this period highlights both continuity and innovation in Alan material culture. Burial mounds continued to grow in complexity, often containing multiple chambers for elite families and their attendants. Golden ornaments, silver vessels, and intricately patterned weapons were placed alongside the deceased, symbolizing both social status and spiritual continuity. Horse harnesses were adorned with depictions of mythical animals, suggesting a persistent intertwining of the functional and the symbolic. These artifacts reveal a society confident in its identity, yet open to influences drawn from Hellenistic, Roman, and Eastern cultures. Within the Alans' social structure, leadership remained a delicate balance of inheritance and merit. Chieftains derived authority from lineage, but had to demonstrate skill, wisdom, and courage to maintain their positions. Councils of elders and respected community members played a role in shaping decisions, mediating disputes, and guiding strategy. These mechanisms ensured cohesion among diverse clans, enabling the Alans to respond collectively to threats and opportunities. Loyalty was both cultivated and earned, a social glue that reinforced unity even during long migrations. Trade and diplomacy were central to the Alans' expansion. Contact with Roman provinces, Hellenistic cities, and Eastern trading centers brought goods, knowledge, and prestige. Greek ceramics, Roman coins, and imported textiles entered Allan settlements and burials, reflecting active participation in interregional commerce. These exchanges were not merely material but also cultural, exposing the Allans to new artistic motifs, technological techniques, and political concepts. Despite these influences, they maintained a distinct identity rooted in language, ritual, and steppe traditions. Military strategy evolved in response to these new environments and challenges. Allan warbands refined their cavalry tactics, coordinating feigned retreats, flanking maneuvers, and rapid redeployments. Composite bows allowed them to engage enemies at distance without sacrificing mobility, while long swords and lances ensured dominance in close combat. Standardized weaponry and armor indicate organized production systems capable of supplying entire units efficiently. The combination of discipline, training, and tactical innovation made the Allans formidable not only to neighboring tribes but also to larger powers, including Rome and Persia. The spiritual life of the Allans remained intertwined with daily existence and strategic action. Horses, central to both work and warfare, were also sacred symbols, and burial rituals often included offerings meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. Mythological motifs, griffins, stags, and serpentine creatures, appeared on weapons, harnesses, and grave goods, reinforcing a cosmology in which the natural and supernatural were closely linked. Oral traditions ensured the continuity of these beliefs, weaving history, moral instruction, and communal identity into stories that guided decision-making and sustained cohesion. The Allans' growing interactions with Rome were increasingly complex. They offered mercenary services to Roman commanders, while simultaneously maintaining independence and negotiating favorable arrangements. Roman texts from this era frequently described the Allans' speed, discipline, and adaptability with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Alliances were often tactical and temporary, yet they provided the Allans with access to wealth, political leverage, and military knowledge, strengthening their position both on the steppe and beyond. Environmental factors continued to influence their movements. Droughts, harsh winters, and competition for grazing lands prompted migrations that expanded their range westward toward the Danube and southward into Armenia and Iberia. These movements were not chaotic but carefully planned, guided by a deep understanding of geography, climate, and intertribal relations. The ability to move entire communities with livestock, weapons, and possessions required sophisticated logistics and social coordination, skills that set the Allans apart from other nomadic groups. By the mid-3rd century, the Allans' cultural and military influence had become regional in scale. They were no longer a peripheral people but active participants in the politics, trade, and warfare of the Black Sea and Caucasus regions. Their identity was a complex blend of steppe heritage, martial excellence, and cosmopolitan engagement, reflecting both continuity and adaptation. Even as they extended their reach, the grasslands and rivers of their homeland remained central, anchoring their cultural memory and sustaining the practices that had ensured survival for generations. The story of the Allans during this period is one of resilience and adaptability. They balanced the demands of mobility, warfare, and diplomacy with cultural continuity and social cohesion. They navigated a landscape of opportunity and risk, maintaining their independence while engaging with empires and neighboring kingdoms. The foundations they established in this era, mastery of mounted warfare, strategic alliances, cultural sophistication, and spiritual depth, would carry them forward into migrations, confrontations, and settlements that reshaped the history of Eurasia. As we follow the Alans in the coming chapters, we will see how these experiences prepared them to confront new challenges. The pressures of the Hunnic migrations, the expansion of Gothic tribes, and eventual integration into Roman territories. Each phase of their journey builds upon the careful strategies, cultural richness, and enduring traditions cultivated on the Pontic steppe, ensuring that the Alans left an imprint far larger than the immediate territories they traversed. By the late 3rd century, the Alans had firmly established themselves as a people of both reputation and reach. Their migrations and raids had extended far beyond the Pontic steppe, touching the northern Black Sea coast, the river valleys of the Caucasus, and even the fringes of Roman provinces. The pace of change accelerated as pressures from rival tribes, environmental challenges, and the shifting political landscape of Eurasia demanded both adaptation and foresight. Yet despite these pressures, the Alans retained the cultural cohesion and martial discipline that had defined them for generations. The landscape itself shaped every decision. Mountain passes, river crossings, and plains were not merely geography. They were strategic considerations. Leaders selected routes based on access to water, pasture, and trade opportunities, while also anticipating potential threats from rival clans or neighboring kingdoms. Scouts were a vital component of Alan operations, moving ahead of main groups to observe terrain, track enemy movements, and identify safe encampments. Such knowledge was accumulated over generations, passed down through oral tradition, and reinforced by repeated practical experience. Burial mounds from this era reveal both continuity and increasing complexity in Alan social structures. Elite kurgans often contained multiple chambers for chieftains, family members, and attendants. Horses and weapons accompanied the deceased, symbolizing both status and spiritual beliefs. Intricate grave goods, including gold ornaments, silver vessels, and finely wrought weapons, reflected not only wealth but also connections to broader networks of trade and cultural influence. These burial practices reinforced social hierarchies, validated leadership, and connected the living to their ancestors in a tangible way. Military organization had reached a level of sophistication that made the Alans a force of regional consequence. Cavalry units were expertly trained to execute coordinated maneuvers, combining the speed and flexibility of light horsemen with the precision of organized warbands. Composite bows allowed engagement at distance, while long swords, lances, and spears ensured effectiveness in close combat. Weapons and armor were often standardized, indicating organized production systems capable of equipping entire contingents efficiently. This combination of training, logistics, and tactical innovation distinguished the Alans from other nomadic groups and allowed them to operate effectively even in the challenging terrains of the Caucasus. Trade and cultural exchange continued to be a defining feature of Alan life. Greek ceramics, Roman coins and Persian textiles appear in settlements and burial sites, evidence of both material wealth and cosmopolitan engagement. These artifacts reflect an openness to foreign influences, integrated selectively into Allan traditions. The synthesis of steppe heritage with Hellenistic, Roman, and Eastern motifs produced a distinct culture, one simultaneously rooted in ancient Iranian-speaking nomadic traditions and informed by the wider Mediterranean and Eurasian worlds. Leadership among the Alans remained a balance of merit and inheritance. Chieftains were expected to demonstrate courage, strategic insight, and diplomacy. Councils of elders, respected warriors, and influential women contributed to decision-making, mediating disputes and guiding collective strategy. This structure maintained cohesion among diverse clans and facilitated coordinated action, whether in warfare, migration, or trade. Authority was respected but contingent on proven ability, ensuring that leadership remained dynamic and adaptable to the challenges of the steppe. Spiritual practices continued to intertwine closely with daily life. Horses were sacred symbols of mobility, wealth, and spiritual connection. Sacrifices of animals and occasional human attendance accompanied elite burials, reflecting beliefs in an afterlife where social status and skill in life continued beyond death. Mythological motifs, griffins, stags, serpents, appeared on weapons, harnesses, and grave goods, encoding cosmological knowledge and reinforcing communal identity. Oral traditions preserved stories, genealogies, and moral instruction, linking generations and guiding both practical and ceremonial life. The Alans' interactions with Rome grew more strategic. While earlier engagements had been primarily raiding or mercenary in nature, by this period the Alans were negotiating alliances, participating in Roman campaigns, and offering their cavalry expertise in exchange for wealth and political leverage. Roman texts note their speed, tactical intelligence, and adaptability, often portraying them as both a valuable asset and a potential threat. These interactions required careful diplomacy, balancing cooperation with independence, and allowing the Alans to maintain autonomy while benefiting from participation in larger imperial networks. Environmental pressures continued to shape their migrations. Harsh winters, droughts, and overgrazed pastures occasionally forced the relocation of entire clans. Yet these movements were not random. Leaders and scouts planned routes carefully, taking into account terrain, resources, and the positions of neighboring peoples. The ability to move swiftly, reorganize, and adapt to new environments was central to Allan's survival and success. Their mobility, combined with social cohesion and military skill, ensured that these pressures became opportunities for expansion rather than threats to existence. By the close of the 3rd century, the Alans had transformed from a regional nomadic confederation into a people whose influence extended across a vast swath of Eurasia. They had perfected the combination of mobility, military discipline, and cultural sophistication. Trade, diplomacy, and martial skill allowed them to interact with empires, client kingdoms, and rival tribes on their own terms. Yet despite these successes, the Alans remained rooted in the rhythms of the steppe. The rolling grasslands, the rivers, the burial mounds, and the seasonal cycles that had guided their ancestors. This period was foundational for the centuries to come. The skills, strategies, and cultural practices honed during these decades would enable the Alans to survive migrations, negotiate with empires, and integrate into new territories. They would confront Gothic tribes, respond to the pressures of Hunnic expansion, and eventually leave a lasting imprint on the territories of Western Europe. Their story in the late 3rd century is a testament to resilience, the ability to thrive in a world of uncertainty while preserving identity, cohesion, and adaptability. As the sun set over the steppe, the Alans rode onward, aware that new horizons lay ahead. Mountains, rivers, and distant kingdoms awaited them, each presenting challenges that would test their mobility, leadership, and unity. Yet the foundations laid during this period: mastery of mounted warfare, sophisticated social organization, deep cultural memory, and strategic diplomacy, ensured that they were prepared for what lay beyond the horizon. The story of the Alans was far from complete, but in these decades, it had taken on a shape, a purpose, and a presence that would resonate for centuries. As the 4th century dawned, the Alans faced a changing world, one in which the forces of migration, empire, and conflict intersected across the Eurasian steppe and beyond. Pressure from Gothic tribes in the north and west, combined with the threat of Hunnic movements from the east, forced the Alans to reassess not only their military strategies, but also their patterns of settlement, alliance, and cultural exchange. These decades would test their adaptability, their leadership, and the cohesion of a society forged in motion. The environment remained a constant teacher. The rolling plains of the Pontic steppe continued to provide sustenance, while rivers, marshes, and mountains offered strategic opportunities and obstacles. Clan leaders relied on the knowledge passed down through generations: which winter pastures could sustain herds, which river crossings were safest, and which mountain passes were vulnerable to ambush. This intimate understanding of geography was both practical and cultural, guiding migrations while embedding a deep connection to the land that shaped their identity. The burial mounds of this era reveal a people increasingly conscious of lineage, status, and ritual. Elite kurgans were carefully structured, with chambers for family members, attendants, and even prized horses. Weapons, ornaments, and horse harnesses bore both decorative and symbolic motifs, including animals drawn from Iranian, steppe, and Mediterranean traditions. These graves were statements of authority and prestige, affirming the social hierarchy while connecting the living to the ancestors whose wisdom, courage, and skill provided both guidance and legitimacy. Military organization had become highly refined. The Alans' cavalry units were capable of coordinated strikes, ambushes, and rapid redeployments across difficult terrain. Composite bows, long swords, and lances were used in combination with tactical intelligence, ensuring both mobility and precision in combat. Standardization of equipment reflected an organized approach to arming warriors, suggesting centralized workshops capable of supplying entire contingents efficiently. This logistical capacity enabled the Alans to project power across vast distances, whether in defensive campaigns or opportunistic raids. Trade and cultural exchange flourished alongside military activity. The Alans maintained connections with the Black Sea coastal cities, Roman provinces, and Persian territories, participating in networks that transported goods, ideas, and technologies. Roman coins, Greek ceramics, and Eastern textiles appear alongside steppe-crafted items, reflecting a society capable of blending practicality with aesthetic and cultural sophistication. This engagement with distant regions allowed the Alans to access resources and knowledge that enhanced both their social status and strategic capabilities. Leadership within the Alans continued to balance merit and inheritance. Chieftains were expected to demonstrate skill, courage, and wisdom, while councils of elders, experienced warriors, and influential women advised on critical decisions. Authority was contingent upon proven ability. Leaders who failed to maintain cohesion or mismanaged alliances risked displacement. This system encouraged both flexibility and accountability, ensuring that clans remained united even amid external pressures and internal rivalries. Spiritual life remained central to the Alans' worldview. Horses, the lifeblood of mobility and warfare, were revered not only for their practical value but also for their symbolic and spiritual significance. Sacrifices, offerings, and ceremonial use of grave goods reinforced beliefs in the continuity of life beyond death. Mythological motifs, griffins, serpents, stags, imbued objects and rituals with layered meanings, linking martial prowess, social status, and cosmology. Oral traditions preserved these teachings, ensuring that history, morality, and communal memory were transmitted through generations even as the Alans migrated or engaged in conflict. The Alans' interactions with Rome grew increasingly complex and strategic. By this period, the empire relied on their cavalry expertise, engaging Alans as mercenaries or allies while negotiating carefully to maintain the balance between utility and autonomy. Roman texts describe their speed, discipline, and adaptability with admiration tinged with apprehension, noting the threat they posed when mismanaged or provoked. The Alans, in turn, leveraged these relationships to secure wealth, influence, and political advantage while preserving the independence essential to their identity. Environmental challenges continued to shape migration patterns. Harsh winters, droughts, and competition for pasture prompted strategic relocations that extended their influence across Europe and the Caucasus. These migrations required careful planning. Routes were scouted, supplies managed, and alliances considered. The ability to move swiftly and efficiently without sacrificing cohesion was a hallmark of the Alans' enduring success. Mobility, social organization, and adaptability allowed them to transform environmental pressures into opportunities for expansion and consolidation. By the mid-4th century, the Alans had solidified their position as a significant power across the Pontic steppe, the northern Black Sea coast, and the southern Caucasus. Their military capabilities, strategic acumen, and cultural sophistication enabled them to influence neighboring kingdoms, negotiate with empires, and integrate aspects of foreign cultures into their own traditions. At the same time, their connection to the steppe, its rhythms, resources, and ancestral memory, remained a guiding force, sustaining identity and cohesion amid the turbulence of migration and conflict. The Alans' story in this period is one of resilience, adaptation, and cultural flourishing. They balanced mobility with stability, warfare with diplomacy, and innovation with tradition. Each movement across the steppe, each engagement with Rome or neighboring peoples, and each burial mound erected for an elite warrior reinforced their identity and expanded their influence. The foundations laid in this era, strategic skill, social cohesion, material sophistication, and spiritual depth, would prepare the Alans for the challenges of the late 4th and 5th centuries, when Hunnic incursions, Gothic migrations, and Roman instability would reshape the landscape of Europe. As the sun sank over the steppe, casting long shadows across the burial mounds and rolling plains, the Alans rode onward, confident in their cohesion and adaptability. The horizon beckoned with both promise and uncertainty. Mountains, rivers, and distant kingdoms awaited them, each presenting challenges that would test their strength, ingenuity, and unity. Yet their mastery of mounted warfare, deep-rooted cultural identity, and strategic acumen ensured that they were prepared. The story of the Alans, already centuries in the making, was poised to enter a transformative phase, one that would carry them far beyond the Pontic steppe and into the broader currents of European and Asian history. The late 4th century brought profound changes to the world surrounding the Alans. The Huns, a nomadic confederation from the Eurasian steppe, began moving westward, their pressure displacing tribes and reshaping political boundaries across the Pontic and Caspian regions. For the Alans, who had long thrived as mobile, independent horsemen, these movements posed both a threat and an opportunity. The arrival of a new, aggressive power forced them to reconsider alliances, migration routes, and their very strategies of survival. The Alans' adaptability became crucial. Rather than resisting migration outright, they adjusted to the shifting landscape by forming temporary confederations with other tribes or moving into territories vacated by displaced peoples. Their mobility allowed them to respond to environmental and political changes quickly, avoiding direct confrontation when disadvantageous while exploiting opportunities to secure grazing lands, trade routes, and strategic positions. In this era, intelligence and foresight were as critical as martial skill, and leaders who could balance these factors commanded respect and loyalty. The archaeological record from this period demonstrates continuity and evolution in Alan material culture. Burial mounds remain central, preserving the memory of elite warriors and their families, but new influences appear in ornamentation and weapon design. Gold and silver items, decorated with intricate animal motifs, now show subtle elements of Gothic and Hunnic artistic styles, indicating interactions and exchanges with neighboring peoples. Weapons continued to be technologically sophisticated, with pattern-welded swords, long lances, and composite bows that allowed for lethal efficiency in both skirmishes and larger engagements. The combination of traditional craftsmanship with external influences illustrates the Alans' ability to integrate innovation without losing cultural identity. Leadership structures evolved to meet the challenges of larger migrations and external threats. While authority remained grounded in hereditary lines and personal achievement, alliances between clans became increasingly vital. Councils of elders, experienced warriors, and influential women played an expanded role in decision-making, mediating disputes and coordinating large-scale movements. This adaptive governance allowed the Alans to maintain cohesion across dispersed groups while responding strategically to threats from Huns, Goths, and other steppe peoples. Leadership was as much about diplomacy and logistics as it was about skill in combat, reflecting a society that valued versatility alongside courage. The Alans' relationship with Rome underwent significant changes in this period. As the Western Empire faced internal instability, the Alans became both a potential ally and a threat along the Danube frontier. Some groups served as mercenary cavalry, providing rapid response units capable of countering incursions or securing trade routes. Others took advantage of Rome's weaknesses, conducting raids that both enriched and demonstrated their strength. Roman historians often emphasized the fearsome speed and unpredictability of Alan warbands, recognizing that their mobility and tactical acumen made them a force that could not be ignored. Trade and cultural exchange intensified. Alan settlements near the Black Sea and along river valleys facilitated the movement of goods, ideas, and technologies. Imported items such as Roman coins, Greek ceramics, and Eastern textiles entered burial contexts alongside local craftsmanship, reflecting both wealth and an openness to diverse cultural influences. These interactions extended beyond material objects. Tactical knowledge, diplomatic practices, and artistic motifs were absorbed into Alan culture, enriching their identity while maintaining the continuity of steppe traditions. Religious and spiritual practices remained central to community cohesion. Horses continued to hold symbolic and practical importance, often included in burial rituals alongside weapons, ornaments, and sometimes attendants. Mythological motifs, griffins, stags, and serpents, adorned horse trappings, swords, and personal items, linking the mortal and spiritual worlds. Oral tradition preserved genealogies, heroic tales, and moral instruction, ensuring continuity of identity even as the Alans migrated across new territories and interacted with foreign powers. The Alans' military techniques reached their zenith during these decades. Cavalry units were capable of executing complex maneuvers, feigned retreats to lure enemies into ambushes, rapid encirclements to overwhelm heavier forces, and precision archery even while galloping at high speed. Coordination among multiple units required disciplined communication and an understanding of terrain, weather, and enemy tactics. Standardization of weapons and armor ensured that entire warbands could operate cohesively, a significant advantage over less organized tribes and neighboring powers. Environmental pressures continued to influence Alan strategies. Droughts, overgrazed pastures, and the threat of hostile incursions prompted migrations that extended westward into Roman territories, northward into forested lands, and southward into the Caucasus. Each movement required careful planning. Scouts surveyed routes, leaders coordinated logistics, and clans maintained cohesion across long distances. Mobility remained a defining characteristic, allowing the Alans to respond to both opportunity and threat with remarkable efficiency. By the end of the 4th century, the Alans had become a force with influence extending across Eurasia. Their military skill, cultural sophistication, and strategic acumen allowed them to negotiate with empires, form alliances, and expand their presence beyond the Pontic steppe. Yet, despite these expansions, The steppe remained the spiritual and practical center of their identity. Grasslands, rivers, and burial mounds continued to anchor their cultural memory, reminding them of origins that shaped their values, rituals, and social cohesion. This period set the stage for the migrations of the 5th century, when the pressures of Hunnic expansion would force the Alans further into Europe, interacting with Goths, Vandals, and ultimately the Roman Empire itself. The foundations laid in the late 4th century, strategic mobility, military sophistication, social cohesion, and cultural continuity, ensured that they could navigate these challenges successfully, leaving an enduring mark on the regions they entered. The Alans of this era exemplify the resilience of steppe nomads confronting an increasingly interconnected and tumultuous world. They balanced warfare, diplomacy, and cultural integration while preserving their traditions and social structures. Their story reminds us that even amid displacement and upheaval, a society grounded in shared identity, skill, and adaptability can endure, thrive, and shape the course of history far beyond its original homelands. The dawn of the 5th century heralded one of the most transformative periods in Alan history. The arrival of the Huns, pushing westward across the Eurasian steppe, created waves of migration that reshaped the political, social, and military landscape of Eastern Europe. For the Alans, these movements were both a threat and an impetus for adaptation. Clans that had once roamed the Pontic steppe freely now faced the necessity of relocation, strategic alliances, and negotiation with both neighboring tribes and the sprawling Roman Empire. The Alans' mobility became their greatest asset. Entire communities, including warriors, families, and livestock, moved swiftly across rivers, plains, and forested lands, seeking safety and opportunity. Scouts and messengers played a vital role, identifying routes, monitoring rival movements, and coordinating the timing of migrations to minimize risk. These strategies were rooted in centuries of steppe tradition, but the scale of migration demanded unprecedented coordination, leadership, and logistical skill. Burial practices continued to reveal the values and social hierarchies of Alan society. Kurgans grew increasingly elaborate, often featuring multiple chambers for leaders and their kin. Horses, weapons, and ornamental objects accompanied the deceased, symbolizing both status and spiritual belief. Gold and silver artifacts, decorated with intricate animal motifs, indicate connections to the broader Mediterranean and steppe world, while local craftsmanship maintained distinct Alan stylistic elements. These burials served as a testament to authority, identity, and continuity, reinforcing the social order even amid the upheaval of migration. Military organization reached a new level of sophistication. The Alans' cavalry units were highly disciplined, capable of executing coordinated maneuvers over vast and varied terrain. Composite bows allowed engagement at distance, while long swords, lances, and spears provided effectiveness in close combat. Standardized weapons and armor ensured cohesion among warbands, while the use of scouts and flanking units enhanced tactical flexibility. These capabilities allowed the Alans not only to defend themselves against hostile forces, but also to assert influence over neighboring tribes and emerging kingdoms. Trade and cultural exchange persisted even during migrations. The Alans maintained connections with Roman provinces, Black Sea ports, and distant steppe regions, acquiring coins, ceramics, and textiles. These objects, often placed in burial contexts alongside local craftsmanship, reflect both wealth and cultural integration. The Alans absorbed foreign techniques and motifs selectively, blending them with steppe traditions to create a hybrid culture that remained distinctly their own. Their ability to integrate influences without losing identity became a hallmark of this period. Leadership structures adapted to the challenges of large-scale migration. Authority remained grounded in both heredity and proven skill, but alliances between clans became increasingly crucial. Councils of elders, experienced warriors, and influential women mediated disputes, coordinated movement, and guided decisions critical to survival. The ability of leaders to maintain cohesion, distribute resources, and negotiate with neighboring peoples was as vital as their skill in combat. This balance of political, military, and social acumen ensured that the Alans remained a unified and adaptive force during times of upheaval. Spiritual practices continued to shape the Alans' worldview. Horses, essential to mobility and warfare, retained sacred significance, often included in burials alongside weapons and ornamental items. Mythological motifs, griffins, serpents, and stags, decorated harnesses, swords, and ceremonial objects, linking the mortal and spiritual realms. Oral traditions preserve genealogies, heroic narratives, and moral instruction, providing continuity even as clans migrated across unfamiliar territories. These practices reinforced identity, unity, and resilience in the face of displacement. The Alans' interactions with Rome reached a critical juncture. Some groups offered their cavalry as mercenaries, integrating into Roman campaigns while retaining autonomy. Others exploited Roman weaknesses to secure territory, wealth, or strategic advantage. Roman historians often noted the Alans' speed, tactical intelligence, and unpredictability, emphasizing both admiration and apprehension. These interactions required delicate diplomacy, balancing alliance, independence, and occasional opportunistic raiding. The Alans' success lay in their ability to navigate this complexity, leveraging their martial reputation while protecting their interests. Environmental pressures continued to influence movement and settlement. Harsh winters, droughts, and competition for pasturelands prompted migrations into new territories, including the Danube Basin and regions within Roman borders. These relocations were carefully planned, considering terrain, resources, and potential threats. Mobility allowed the Alans to turn challenges into opportunities, securing lands and forging alliances while preserving social cohesion and cultural identity. By the mid-5th century, the Alans had expanded their influence beyond the Pontic steppe into Western Europe. Their mobility, military skill, and strategic adaptability enabled them to interact with Goths, Vandals, and other migrating peoples, setting the stage for integration into the Roman world. The foundations laid over centuries, mastery of mounted warfare, sophisticated social structures, cultural adaptability, and spiritual continuity, allowed the Alans to thrive even amid displacement and the shifting tides of empire. The Alans' journey during this period exemplifies resilience and strategic foresight. They balanced warfare, diplomacy, and cultural integration while preserving traditions and social cohesion. Each migration, alliance, and engagement with neighboring powers strengthened their identity and extended their influence. The Alans were no longer confined to the steppe. They had become actors capable of shaping the political, cultural, and military landscape of regions far from their original homeland. As the sun set over the plains and distant mountains, the Alans rode onward, aware of both challenges and opportunities that awaited them. Their journey would continue into Roman territories, influence the movements of other tribes, and leave an enduring imprint on European history. The Alans of the early 5th century demonstrate that adaptability, cohesion, and cultural continuity are not only survival mechanisms but tools for shaping the wider world. The mid-5th century marked a defining moment in the Alans' history, as their migrations carried them further into the territories of the collapsing Western Roman Empire. The pressure of Hunnic expansion had forced them westward, and in doing so, the Alans encountered new peoples, landscapes, and political structures that required both adaptation and ingenuity. No longer solely steppe warriors, they now became participants in the complex web of late antique Europe, interacting with Goths, Vandals, Romans, and other migrating tribes. Their mobility and knowledge of mounted warfare allowed the Alans to move swiftly across rivers, plains, and mountainous regions, seizing opportunities and avoiding unnecessary conflict. Scouts and messengers played a crucial role in mapping routes, locating safe passage, and assessing the strength and disposition of neighboring powers. These movements were meticulously planned, reflecting centuries of accumulated knowledge about terrain, climate, and steppe logistics. Migration had become both a survival strategy and a means of asserting influence over new territories. Archaeological evidence from this period illustrates a fascinating blend of continuity and adaptation. Burial mounds continued to mark the resting places of elite warriors, but many show influences from Western European artistic traditions alongside traditional steppe motifs. Gold and silver ornaments, weapons, and horse harnesses reflect a fusion of cultural styles, demonstrating that the Alans were engaging with their new surroundings while preserving a distinct identity. These burials served as both markers of social status and symbols of continuity, reinforcing communal cohesion amid displacement. The Alans' military organization remained a cornerstone of their survival and influence. Cavalry units executed complex maneuvers with speed and precision, employing composite bows, lances, and long swords to dominate both open battlefields and constricted terrain. Coordination among multiple units allowed for effective ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and feigned retreats, while standardized equipment ensured cohesion among warbands. These tactics, honed over centuries on the steppe, proved decisive in interactions with Goths, Vandals, and even Roman forces. Trade and cultural exchange flourished as the Alans integrated into Western European networks. Roman coins, Mediterranean pottery, and textiles from distant regions entered Alan settlements, often appearing alongside traditional steppe craftsmanship in both daily life and burial contexts. This blending of material culture reflects an openness to innovation without eroding the foundations of their identity. The Alans absorbed techniques, aesthetics, and knowledge from surrounding cultures while retaining their language, oral traditions, and steppe customs, creating a hybrid yet distinctly Allan cultural identity. Leadership structures adapted to the challenges of migration and settlement. Chieftains continued to wield authority based on merit and lineage, but collaboration among clans became increasingly important. Councils of elders, experienced warriors, and influential women played critical roles in mediating disputes, coordinating movements, and guiding collective strategy. Maintaining cohesion during long migrations, negotiating with foreign powers, and managing resources required a sophisticated balance of diplomacy, military skill, and social insight. Leaders who could achieve this balance strengthened both the community and their own legitimacy. Spiritual practices retained a central role, providing continuity and meaning amid upheaval. Horses, vital for mobility and warfare, were also sacred symbols, often included in burials alongside weapons, ornaments, and occasionally attendants. Mythological motifs, griffins, serpents, stags, continued to appear on harnesses, swords, and ceremonial objects, linking the mortal and spiritual worlds. Oral traditions preserved heroic narratives, genealogies, and moral instruction, ensuring the transmission of identity, cultural memory, and ethical guidance across generations and geographic boundaries. The Alans' interactions with Rome during this period were complex and often pragmatic. Some groups offered their cavalry as mercenaries, integrating into Roman campaigns while negotiating autonomy and wealth. Others leveraged Rome's political weakness to secure territories, resources, or strategic positions. Roman chroniclers frequently remarked on the Alans' speed, tactical intelligence, and unpredictability, noting that their presence could both aid and challenge imperial objectives. Diplomacy, opportunistic raiding, and military expertise combined to allow the Alans to navigate these relationships effectively. Environmental factors continued to shape movement and settlement. Harsh winters, droughts, and competition for pastures prompted migrations into regions along the Danube, across the Rhine, and into the Iberian Peninsula. These movements were carefully orchestrated. Leaders coordinated routes, managed supplies, and considered alliances and potential threats. The Alans' capacity for swift, organized relocation ensured that environmental pressures became strategic advantages rather than existential threats. By the middle of the 5th century, the Alans had left a significant imprint on Western Europe. They participated in the crossing of the Rhine, settlement in Gaul and Hispania, and integration into the networks of migrating tribes such as the Vandals and Suebi. Their cavalry, discipline, and adaptability allowed them to assert influence far beyond their original steppe homelands. Yet even in these distant lands, the steppe remained central to their identity. Oral traditions, burial practices, and martial culture kept the memory of the Pontic plains alive, guiding strategy, social cohesion, and cultural continuity. This period demonstrates the Alans' remarkable resilience. They balanced warfare, diplomacy, and cultural integration while preserving social cohesion and traditional practices. Their migrations, alliances, and engagements with other powers were not acts of desperation, but deliberate strategies that expanded their influence, and ensured survival. The Alans were no longer confined to the Eurasian steppe. They were agents shaping the political, military, and cultural landscape of Europe, leaving a legacy that would echo for centuries. As the sun set over the Rhine and Iberian valleys, the Alans continued their journey, blending mobility, martial prowess, and cultural identity. Their story in the mid-5th century exemplifies the ability of a society to adapt to a rapidly changing world while preserving the core elements that define it. The foundations of their identity, strategic skill, social cohesion, cultural memory, and spiritual depth ensured that the Alans would continue to influence history far beyond the lands of their ancestors. By the latter half of the 5th century, the Alans had become fully enmeshed in the complex political and military landscape of Western Europe. Their migrations, prompted by Hunnic pressures and opportunities in Roman territories, had carried them across the Rhine, into Gaul, and further into the Iberian Peninsula. No longer exclusively steppe nomads, the Alans were now both settlers and warriors, blending the mobility and tactics of their homeland with the political realities of Europe. Their adaptability had become central to survival, shaping their identity and influence in profound ways. Settlements during this period were varied. Some Alans established temporary encampments along key rivers and trade routes, maintaining mobility while exploiting fertile lands and resources. Others settled more permanently, integrating into local communities or forming alliances with Roman authorities and other migrating tribes. Archaeological evidence shows a continued emphasis on burial mounds, though with stylistic adaptations reflecting the interaction with Western European traditions. Gold ornaments, weapons, and horse harnesses appear alongside local motifs, preserving core steppe aesthetics while engaging with the new cultural milieu. Military organization remained a defining feature. Alan cavalry retained the speed, discipline, and tactical versatility honed over centuries on the Pontic steppe. Composite bows allowed long-range attacks, while lances and swords were used for close combat, often in coordinated maneuvers across varied terrain. Standardization of weapons and armor persisted, reflecting organized production and preparation for both defense and strategic campaigns. Their military presence influenced neighboring tribes and Roman territories alike, enabling the Alans to negotiate, assert influence, and integrate into ongoing conflicts. Leadership continued to balance tradition and pragmatism. Chieftains maintained authority through a combination of inheritance, personal skill, and demonstrated strategic insight. Councils of elders and respected warriors mediated disputes, coordinated migrations, and oversaw alliances. As interactions with other tribes and Roman authorities increased, leaders were required not only to command on the battlefield, but to navigate diplomacy, resource management, and social cohesion. Those who excelled ensured that the Alans remained a cohesive and adaptive force despite the challenges of resettlement. Trade and cultural exchange flourished. Alans engaged with local Roman economies, obtaining coins, pottery, textiles, and other goods that enriched both material culture and political leverage. Integration with Western European trade networks allowed them to supplement their traditional pastoral economy, supporting larger populations and enabling sustained military campaigns. Cultural exchange also manifested in artistic motifs, burial customs, and ritual practices, creating a hybrid identity that merged steppe traditions with European influences. Spiritual and ritual life remained central, sustaining identity across migration and settlement. Horses retained sacred status, often accompanying elites in burials alongside weapons and ornamental items. Mythological motifs: griffins, serpents, stags, persisted on harnesses, swords, and ceremonial objects, linking the mortal and spiritual worlds. Oral tradition preserved genealogies, heroic tales, and moral instruction, maintaining continuity even as clans adapted to new territories and political structures. These practices reinforced both community cohesion and individual status, providing stability in a rapidly changing environment. The Alans' military and diplomatic roles in Western Europe were increasingly intertwined. Some groups allied with Roman forces as cavalry auxiliaries, assisting in campaigns against other migrating tribes or local rebellions. Others leveraged their martial reputation to secure favorable terms with local rulers, negotiate land rights, or extract tribute. Roman chroniclers noted the Alans' speed, discipline, and unpredictability, describing them as both a valuable asset and a formidable threat. Their ability to integrate with Roman systems while retaining autonomy highlights their strategic acumen and adaptability. Environmental factors continued to influence Alan movements and settlements. Fertile river valleys, forested regions, and accessible pastures dictated migration patterns, resource allocation, and temporary encampment locations. The Alans' intimate knowledge of terrain, honed over centuries on the steppe, allowed them to exploit these landscapes effectively, securing food, water, and strategic advantage. Even as they settled in new regions, mobility remained central to their identity, enabling rapid response to environmental pressures, rival tribes, or political shifts. By the end of the 5th century, the Alans had established a significant presence across regions of Western Europe, particularly in Gaul and the Iberian Peninsula. Their influence extended beyond the battlefield, impacting local politics, economy, and culture. Settlements, alliances, and integration with other tribes reflect a society capable of adapting to new challenges while preserving core traditions and values. The Alans were no longer peripheral nomads. They were active participants in the transformation of post-Roman Europe, leaving a lasting imprint on the territories they inhabited. The legacy of the Alans during this period is one of adaptability, resilience, and strategic foresight. They balanced warfare, diplomacy, and cultural integration while maintaining social cohesion and spiritual continuity. Each migration, settlement, and engagement with other powers reinforced identity and extended influence, demonstrating a remarkable capacity to navigate a rapidly changing world. The Alans had transformed from steppe nomads into a people capable of shaping the political, cultural, and military landscape of Western Europe, leaving a mark that would echo for generations. As twilight settled over the valleys of Gaul and the Iberian landscapes, the Alans pressed onward, blending the traditions of their steppe homeland with the realities of a new European world. Their story in the mid to late 5th century exemplifies the power of adaptation, the endurance of identity, and the impact of strategic mobility. The foundations of their culture, military mastery, social cohesion, cultural memory, and spiritual depth ensured that the Alans' influence would endure far beyond the rolling plains of the Pontic steppe. The transition into the 6th century brought new dynamics for the Alans, as their settlements in Gaul and the Iberian Peninsula became increasingly integrated with local populations and neighboring tribes. The collapse of centralized Roman authority in these regions created both challenges and opportunities. The Alans, with their combination of martial skill, mobility, and cultural adaptability, were uniquely positioned to assert influence while preserving their traditions. Their identity, forged over centuries on the Pontic steppe, remained resilient even as the landscapes and political structures around them shifted dramatically. Settlement patterns reflected this adaptation. Some Alans established semi-permanent communities along river valleys and fertile plains, maintaining control over strategic resources and trade routes. Others remained more mobile, functioning as mounted contingents capable of responding to external threats or participating in military alliances. Archaeological evidence indicates a synthesis of steppe and local material culture. Burial mounds persisted, but the ornamentation on weapons, harnesses, and jewelry increasingly reflected regional artistic influences. Gold, silver, and bronze artifacts display a combination of traditional steppe motifs and Western European designs, revealing a society that balanced continuity with innovation. Military organization retained its centrality in Alan life. Cavalry units continued to execute complex maneuvers honed over generations, employing composite bows, lances, and swords with precision. Standardization of equipment allowed cohesion among warbands, while strategic use of scouts and intelligence enabled the Alans to navigate unfamiliar terrain effectively. Their military capabilities provided both defense and leverage, allowing the Alans to negotiate with neighboring tribes, resist external threats, and participate in regional conflicts with skill and authority. Leadership evolved to meet the challenges of settlement, migration, and political negotiation. Authority remained grounded in a combination of heredity and demonstrated ability, but alliances among clans and with local rulers became increasingly important. Councils of elders and respected warriors continued to play a central role in mediation and decision-making. Leadership now required not only martial prowess but also diplomatic skill, logistical management, and the ability to maintain cohesion across dispersed communities. Those who excelled in these areas ensured the survival and prosperity of their people in a rapidly changing world. Trade and cultural exchange flourished as the Alans interacted with neighboring tribes and the remnants of Roman authority. Roman coins, Mediterranean pottery, and textiles entered settlements, alongside traditional steppe-crafted items. This integration of material culture reflects both economic opportunity and cultural adaptability. The Alans absorbed practical and aesthetic elements from local traditions while maintaining distinctive features of their own heritage. Their ability to integrate without losing identity became a defining characteristic, facilitating alliances, enhancing wealth, and supporting both military and social stability. Spiritual practices continued to anchor the Alans' communal identity. Horses, vital for transportation, warfare, and status, remained sacred symbols, often accompanying elite burials alongside weapons and ornaments. Mythological motifs, griffins, stags, and serpents, persisted, linking material culture to a cosmology that connected the living, the dead, and the natural world. Oral traditions preserved heroic narratives, genealogies, and ethical teachings, ensuring that identity, cultural continuity, and communal cohesion endured even amid migration, settlement, and interaction with diverse populations. The Alans' political and military interactions with neighboring groups expanded during this period. Some acted as allies or mercenaries to Gothic, Vandal, and local rulers, lending cavalry support in conflicts or campaigns. Others leveraged their martial reputation to assert influence over territories, negotiate favorable terms, or establish new settlements. Roman chroniclers noted their discipline, speed, and tactical intelligence, emphasizing their ability to operate autonomously while influencing the broader geopolitical landscape. The Alans' reputation as skilled, mobile warriors ensured that their presence remained consequential in regional politics. Environmental factors continued to shape their movements and settlements. River valleys, fertile plains, and accessible pastures dictated patterns of migration, settlement, and resource management. Even within permanent or semi-permanent communities, mobility remained a central aspect of strategy, allowing rapid response to environmental pressures, rival groups, or political instability. The Alans' deep understanding of terrain, climate, and local ecology enabled them to thrive in new environments without abandoning the principles and practices that had sustained them for centuries. By the early 6th century, the Alans had firmly established their presence in Western Europe, particularly in the regions of Gaul and the Iberian Peninsula. Their settlements, military activity, and cultural interactions left a lasting imprint, influencing local politics, military strategies, and material culture. Yet despite their integration, they retained a distinct identity, rooted in steppe traditions, social cohesion, and shared memory of their ancestral homelands. The Alans had transitioned from nomadic raiders to influential regional actors, demonstrating a remarkable capacity for adaptation without eroding core values. This period underscores the Alans' resilience, strategic foresight, and cultural fluidity. They balanced warfare, diplomacy, and integration with the preservation of social structures, spiritual traditions, and cultural memory. Each migration, settlement, and engagement reinforced communal identity while expanding their influence. The Alans were no longer confined to the steppe. They were now agents shaping the political, cultural, and military landscapes of early medieval Europe. Their legacy, built over centuries of mobility, adaptation, and cohesion, would resonate for generations in both material culture and historical memory. As the evening sun bathed the Iberian and Gallic landscapes in soft light, the Alans rode onward, carrying the wisdom, traditions, and strategies of the Pontic steppe into a transformed European world. Their story in the early 6th century exemplifies the enduring power of adaptability, cultural memory, and social cohesion. The foundations of their identity, military mastery, strategic mobility, ritual continuity, and communal resilience ensured that the Alans would leave a lasting imprint on the regions they inhabited, securing a place in the broader currents of European history as the 6th century advanced. The Alans continued to solidify their presence in Western Europe, particularly in the Iberian Peninsula, where they had established settlements alongside other migrating peoples. The political fragmentation of post-Roman territories provided both opportunities and challenges. The Alans were no longer just warriors of the steppe. They were now participants in complex networks of alliances, conflicts, and governance, negotiating with local rulers, Gothic and Vandal kingdoms, and the remnants of Roman authority. Their adaptability and cohesion remained central to their success. Settlement patterns reflected a nuanced understanding of the new lands. River valleys, fertile plains, and strategic highlands became centers of semi-permanent habitation, while mobile cavalry units continued to patrol and defend broader territories. Archaeological evidence from this period demonstrates the integration of local architectural and artistic influences alongside traditional steppe practices. Burial mounds persisted but were often adapted to regional styles, with artifacts displaying a fusion of steppe motifs and Iberian or Visigothic elements. Gold and silver ornaments, weaponry, and horse trappings reveal a society that valued both continuity and engagement with its surroundings. The Alans' military organization retained its distinctive characteristics while adapting to the European context. Cavalry remained the backbone of their forces, capable of executing rapid maneuvers, ambushes, and flanking operations. Composite bows, long lances, and swords allowed them to engage effectively across diverse terrain, from open plains to river valleys and wooded hills. Standardization of weaponry and armor continued to support coordinated action among warbands, ensuring cohesion during both raids and pitched battles. Their tactical expertise made them valuable allies and formidable opponents in the shifting political landscape of early medieval Iberia. Leadership within the Alans evolved to address both internal governance and external relations. Authority continued to rest on a combination of heredity, martial skill, and demonstrated strategic insight. Councils of elders, seasoned warriors, and influential women played key roles in decision-making, mediating disputes, and coordinating alliances. Leaders were required not only to command in battle but also to navigate diplomacy, manage resources, and maintain social cohesion across diverse and often dispersed communities. Effective leadership ensured that the Alans could project power, preserve identity, and negotiate strategically with other tribes and local kingdoms. Trade and cultural exchange flourished alongside military and political activity. The Alans engaged with local economies, facilitating the flow of goods such as Roman coins, Mediterranean pottery, textiles, and local Iberian products. Burial goods and artifacts from settlements reflect this blending of cultures, combining traditional steppe craftsmanship with regional influences. This synthesis reinforced social cohesion, demonstrated wealth and status, and facilitated alliances, enabling the Alans to maintain both cultural identity and pragmatic integration into the societies around them. Spiritual life remained central to the Alans' communal identity. Horses continued to symbolize status, mobility, and sacred connection, often accompanying elite burials alongside weapons and ornamental items. Mythological motifs, griffins, serpents, stags, persisted on ceremonial objects, maintaining links between the physical and spiritual realms. Oral traditions preserved genealogies, heroic tales, and moral instruction, ensuring that the community's history and values were transmitted across generations, even as they adapted to new environments and social contexts. The Alans' interactions with neighboring powers were increasingly strategic. Some groups formed alliances with Visigothic and Vandal kingdoms, lending cavalry support to military campaigns or serving as intermediaries in regional disputes. Others leveraged their martial reputation to negotiate favorable settlement terms, acquire land, or assert influence over contested regions. Roman chroniclers, though fading in authority by this period, continued to note the Alans' speed, discipline, and tactical intelligence, emphasizing their importance in shaping the outcomes of regional conflicts. Environmental factors continued to guide movement and settlement patterns. Fertile valleys, accessible pastures, and defensible highlands influenced the placement of settlements and temporary encampments. Even as semi-permanent communities formed, mobility remained central to survival and strategic advantage. The Alans' understanding of terrain, climate, and resource distribution, honed over centuries on the steppe, allowed them to navigate the Iberian and southern European landscapes effectively, turning environmental challenges into opportunities for settlement and influence. By the mid-6th century, the Alans had secured a lasting presence in the Iberian Peninsula, influencing the political and cultural landscape alongside Visigoths, Suebi, and remnants of Roman authority. Their settlements, military organization, and strategic alliances enabled them to exert influence beyond their numbers, shaping local governance, warfare, and trade networks. Despite integration into European societies, they retained a distinctive identity rooted in steppe traditions, martial culture, and communal memory. The story of the Alans in this period demonstrates resilience, adaptability, and strategic foresight. They balanced warfare, diplomacy, cultural exchange, and social cohesion while preserving their identity and traditions. Each settlement, alliance, and engagement reinforced communal continuity, allowing the Alans to thrive in a world transformed by migration, political fragmentation, and the decline of Roman authority. Their presence in Iberia illustrates how a nomadic, steppe-rooted society could adapt to settled life while maintaining the principles that had guided them for centuries. As twilight settled over the Iberian hills and river valleys, the Alans moved with the assurance of a people who had successfully navigated centuries of upheaval. Their legacy in the 6th century was one of strategic adaptation, martial excellence, and cultural continuity. The foundations of their identity, military mastery, social cohesion, ritual practice, and mobility, ensured that the Alans would continue to influence the societies and landscapes they inhabited, leaving an imprint that would endure in both material culture and historical memory. As the 6th century progressed, the Alans in the Iberian Peninsula faced a new era of political complexity. Visigothic consolidation under emerging kingdoms reshaped power dynamics, while regional disputes and shifting alliances created both opportunities and challenges. The Alans, though numerically smaller than the dominant Gothic populations, retained influence through their cavalry, strategic settlements, and capacity for diplomacy. Their ability to balance martial skill with political acumen allowed them to navigate this landscape while preserving cultural identity. Settlement patterns became increasingly organized, blending steppe traditions with local architectural and social norms. River valleys, fertile plains, and defensible hilltops formed the centers of Allan habitation. Archaeological evidence demonstrates continued use of burial mounds, with artifacts displaying a mix of steppe motifs and Visigothic or Iberian designs. Weapons, gold and silver ornaments, and horse harnesses indicate both social status and continued cultural memory, bridging the steppe origins of the Allans with their new European context. These settlements facilitated defense, trade, and cultural continuity, sustaining communities across generations. Military organization remained central to their identity. Allan cavalry units, renowned for speed, mobility, and tactical sophistication, were integrated into regional power structures, sometimes serving as elite auxiliaries in Visigothic campaigns. Composite bows, long swords, and lances remained core tools of warfare, allowing the Allans to conduct ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and rapid strikes with precision. Standardized equipment and disciplined units ensured cohesion, enabling a smaller population to exert disproportionate influence over larger regional powers. Leadership adapted to the demands of semi-permanent settlement and political negotiation. Chieftains continued to derive authority from heredity, personal skill, and strategic insight, while councils of elders, experienced warriors, and influential women mediated disputes, coordinated alliances, and advised on matters of trade, settlement, and warfare. Political acumen became as critical as martial ability, requiring leaders to maintain cohesion within their own communities while negotiating effectively with Visigothic authorities and other local powers. Trade and cultural interaction flourished alongside military and political engagement. Allan communities participated in regional trade networks, acquiring Roman coins, Mediterranean pottery, textiles, and local agricultural products. Burial goods and settlement artifacts reflect this blending, combining steppe craftsmanship with Iberian and Visigothic influences. This synthesis not only reinforced social hierarchy and cultural identity, but also facilitated alliances, economic stability, and political leverage, demonstrating the Allans' ability to thrive in a multicultural environment. Spiritual practices continued to anchor the Allans' identity. Horses, essential for mobility, warfare, and status, remained central symbols in ritual life and burial customs. Mythological motifs, griffins, serpents, stags, continued to adorn weapons, harnesses, and ceremonial objects, linking the physical and spiritual realms. Oral traditions preserve genealogies, heroic narratives, and ethical teachings, ensuring that communal memory and moral guidance endured even as the Allans adapted to new social and political contexts. The Allans' strategic role within the Iberian Peninsula expanded. While some groups maintained semi-autonomous communities, others were integrated into Visigothic military campaigns, lending their cavalry as a mobile and disciplined force. Their reputation for speed, precision, and tactical intelligence allowed them to influence regional outcomes, negotiate advantageous terms for land and resources, and maintain a degree of autonomy despite the dominance of Visigothic authority. This dual role, both integrated and distinct, exemplifies the adaptability that had defined the Alans for centuries. Environmental considerations continued to shape settlement and mobility. Access to fertile lands, pastures, and water sources dictated the location of villages, seasonal camps, and defensive positions. Even within settled areas, mobility remained essential, allowing rapid response to regional conflicts, environmental pressures, or political shifts. The Alans' centuries-old knowledge of terrain, logistics, and resource management, inherited from their Pontic steppe ancestors, provided a strategic advantage in navigating the Iberian landscape. By the late 6th century, the Alans had become a recognized and influential presence within the Iberian Peninsula. Their settlements, military expertise, and diplomatic activity allowed them to participate meaningfully in regional politics, shaping alliances, trade, and territorial control. Despite integration with Visigothic society, they retained a distinct identity rooted in steppe traditions, martial culture, and communal memory. The Alans had transitioned from nomadic horsemen to semi-sedentary, politically active communities while preserving the foundations of their cultural heritage. The Alans' experience in this period demonstrates the resilience, adaptability, and strategic foresight that had characterized them for centuries. They balanced military engagement, diplomacy, cultural integration, and the preservation of social and spiritual traditions. Each settlement, alliance, and campaign reinforced identity and extended influence, ensuring that the Alans would continue to leave a lasting imprint on the Iberian Peninsula and beyond. Their story reflects the enduring power of cohesion, mobility, and cultural memory in shaping historical outcomes. As twilight fell over the Iberian hills and river valleys, the Alans remained vigilant and poised, a community that had successfully navigated centuries of migration, warfare, and cultural exchange. Their legacy in the late 6th century was one of integration, influence, and continuity. The foundations of their identity, martial skill, strategic mobility, social cohesion, and spiritual depth, ensured that the Alans would endure as a distinct and influential people, bridging the legacy of the Pontic steppe with the evolving societies of Western Europe. By the dawn of the 7th century, the Alans had fully transitioned from the mobile horsemen of the Pontic steppe into settled communities across the Iberian Peninsula. Yet the spirit of the steppe continued to define them. Their influence, though more localized than during earlier centuries of wide-ranging migrations, remained profound. The Alans' story, spanning nearly a millennium, is one of resilience, adaptability, and the delicate balance between tradition and transformation. The settlements established by the Alans in Iberia were organized strategically, reflecting centuries of experience with mobility, defense, and resource management. River valleys, fertile plains, and accessible highlands became the centers of communal life, while smaller satellite settlements maintained the flexibility and responsiveness that had characterized their steppe origins. Even in semi-permanent villages, the skills of mounted warfare, scouting, and rapid communication were preserved, ensuring that the community could respond effectively to both environmental and political challenges. Archaeological evidence from this period paints a vivid picture of cultural synthesis. Burial practices maintain steppe traditions, with mounds, horses, and weapons continuing to accompany elite individuals. Yet the integration of Iberian and Visigothic artistic motifs reflects the Alans' engagement with their surroundings, blending indigenous and steppe aesthetics. Gold ornaments, silver vessels, and intricately decorated horse harnesses serve as testament to the fusion of cultures, illustrating how the Alans preserved their identity while embracing the practical and artistic innovations of their new homelands. The military organization of the Alans evolved alongside these changes. While the vast steppe warbands had given way to smaller, more localized contingents, the emphasis on mobility, precision, and coordination remained. Cavalry units executed rapid maneuvers, protecting settlements, escorting trade caravans, and participating in regional conflicts. Composite bows, lances, and swords continued to be central to their tactical approach, and standardization of equipment ensured effective operation within and between communities. Their martial skill enabled them to retain influence disproportionate to their numbers, securing both autonomy and respect in a landscape dominated by Visigothic and other regional powers. Leadership in this final period reflected the fusion of old and new. Authority remained tied to lineage and demonstrated skill, but increasingly emphasized diplomacy, resource management, and mediation between allied or neighboring communities. Councils of elders and respected warriors guided decision-making, maintaining cohesion across settlements while negotiating alliances and territorial arrangements. Influential women, as in earlier centuries, played essential roles in maintaining social continuity, cultural knowledge, and intercommunal relations. This system of governance allowed the Alans to preserve autonomy while thriving in an environment shaped by external authorities. Trade and cultural exchange continued to define daily life and social status. Alan communities participated actively in regional economies, acquiring goods such as Roman coins, Mediterranean pottery, and Iberian textiles. Settlement artifacts demonstrate the ongoing fusion of steppe and local craftsmanship, reflecting a society that valued both continuity and innovation. The integration of imported and local items reinforced social hierarchy, facilitated diplomatic engagement, and demonstrated the Alans' ability to adapt culturally without sacrificing the identity rooted in their steppe origins. Spiritual and ritual life remained central. Horses, sacred symbols of mobility, status, and connection to the divine, continued to accompany elite burials. Mythological motifs, including griffins, stags, and serpents, adorned weapons, horse trappings, and ceremonial objects, maintaining links between the physical and spiritual worlds. Oral traditions preserved heroic narratives, genealogies, and moral teachings, ensuring that the wisdom and values of the steppe endured even as communities adapted to Iberian life. These practices anchored the Alans' identity, providing continuity and cohesion across centuries of change. The Alans' integration into the Iberian Peninsula was not passive. They maintained influence through military skill, strategic alliances, and social cohesion, participating in Visigothic political structures while retaining distinct communal identity. Their cavalry continued to play a decisive role in conflicts and border defense, and their settlements acted as nodes of cultural preservation and economic exchange. The Alans demonstrated the capacity to adapt to new geopolitical realities without losing the core elements that had sustained them for generations. Environmental factors remained central to survival and strategy. Access to fertile lands, water, and pastures guided settlement placement and resource management. Seasonal mobility persisted, echoing the rhythms of the steppe, and the Alans' centuries-old knowledge of terrain, climate, and logistics ensured that even semi-permanent settlements could respond effectively to local challenges. This combination of rootedness and flexibility allowed the Alans to thrive despite the political and ecological transformations of the early medieval Iberian landscape. By the 7th century, the Alans' legacy was firmly embedded in the cultural, military, and social fabric of the Iberian Peninsula. Their migrations from the Pontic steppe, interactions with Goths, Vandals, and Romans, and eventual settlements demonstrate a remarkable capacity for endurance, adaptation, and strategic foresight. They exemplify a people who could navigate centuries of upheaval while preserving identity, cultural continuity, and social cohesion. The Alans' journey, from steppe nomads to influential European communities, is a testament to resilience, adaptability, and the enduring power of cultural memory. As the sun set over the Iberian hills and rivers, the Alans remained a living testament to the fusion of mobility, martial skill, and cultural preservation. Their story, stretching from the vast Pontic Caspian steppe to the fertile valleys of Iberia, exemplifies the enduring impact of a people who mastered both the art of war and the subtleties of diplomacy, trade, and cultural integration. The Alans' history teaches that identity, when anchored in shared memory, social cohesion, and adaptability, can endure through centuries of change, leaving an indelible mark on the landscapes and societies it touches. The Alans had traveled across continents, faced the pressures of Huns, Goths, and collapsing empires, yet they preserved their core values: mobility, martial mastery, spiritual depth, and cultural continuity. Their journey, rich with adaptation and resilience, is a story of survival and influence, a story that resonates across time, echoing the rhythms of the steppe in the heart of Europe. It is a story of a people who, against the currents of history, maintained their identity, shaped the lands they inhabited, and left a legacy that would endure far beyond their centuries. The Alans, once nomadic horsemen of the Pontic steppe, had become a permanent thread in the fabric of European history. From their early raids and migrations to the settlements and alliances of the Iberian Peninsula, their journey is a meditation on survival, strategy, and identity. The hills, rivers, and burial mounds they left behind are more than remnants of a people. They are markers of a legacy that reminds us of the enduring power of adaptability, cohesion, and cultural memory.